On the dark desert highway, the cool wind in my head, and the warm smell of the desert, there was a little disagreement early on about how much we should work and how hard we should work. 77 Don Felder, the former guitarist for the Eagles, has finally broken his silence about his former bandmate Joe Walsh, who struggled with substance use, loss, and controversies during his time in the band and their relationship. Join us as we reveal every detail. The different guitar playing styles of Walsh and Felder helped shape the Eagles' sound. Felder's straightforward approach often worked well with Walsh's more wild and free style. However, behind the scenes, Felder's departure from the band created a gap between them. Aside from being a party-loving wild man, Joe Walsh was much more carefree than Felder. He had a rebellious and unpredictable nature because of his past struggles with substance use. This sometimes affected his playing style. He also preferred bluesy guitar solos to more structured guitar lines. Felder often wrote about how Walsh's willingness to do his own thing occasionally caused problems with the more restrained Felder was focused on making polished professional recordings, but most of the problems started between him and Glenn. Unlike Walsh, Felder was seen as more disciplined, and his calm, introverted nature often made him seem at odds with the other band members. Felder has remarked that he was often upset with what he thought was Walsh's lack of dedication to the band, especially in the 1970s and 1980s, when Walsh's problems and conduct sometimes got in the way of the band's work. Joseph Fiddler Walsh was born on November 20th, 1947. He is an American guitarist, singer, and songwriter who is best known for being in the rock band Eagles. When I was a kid, Walsh first experienced the initial catastrophe of his life when his father, Robert Newton Fiddler, who was a pilot with the United States Air Force, died in a plane crash near Okinawa on July 22, 1949, at the age of 5. Walsh's stepfather adopted him and gave him his stepfather's last name. However, throughout the mid-1950s, he kept Fiddler as his middle name. It was typical for kids to use their stepfather's name for Social Security, school registration, and health documents. When Walsh was 10 years old, he acquired his first guitar. He learned how to play it and started to venture out. After hearing Walk Don't Run, he decided he wanted to be a guitarist. One of the things that inspired him the most at the time was how well the Beatles did. He took the place of Bruce Hoffman and played bass for the Madison-based band The Nomads, which was very successful in the area. New Jersey started his career as a rock musician at the horrible Kent State Massacre in 1970. Wall, who saw what happened, was very affected by it and went out of college after one term to focus on his music career. Rock legends like Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, and Pete Townshend have praised Joe Walsh's contributions to music. He has had a huge impact on the music industry with 12 solo studio albums, 6 compilation albums, and 2 live albums to his name. His career has spanned 5 decades and included work as a solo artist in other bands like James Gang and New Zealand's Herbs. He was a member of the supergroup The Best and achieved success as a solo artist and a studio musician. By the end of 2011, he was ranked 54th on the list of the 100 greatest guitarists of all time. This was just after he'd attended the mid-60s. Kent State University Walsh played with a number of local Ohio bands before becoming famous with the James Gang. Their hit song was able to showcase his skills right away. After leaving the James Gang in 1972, Walsh formed Barnstorm with Joe Vidal and Kenny Pacelli. The band made 3 albums, but their work was marketed as Walsh solo projects. The last Barnstorm album, So What, which came out in 1974, had significant contributions from most Eagles members at producer Bill Simmy's suggestion. Walsh became a guitarist and keyboards for the Eagles, taking the place of a founding member. Bernie Leon's debut album with the band was called Hotel California. In 1998, a vote of guitarist magazine readers named the solos by Joe Walsh and Don Felder on Hotel California the best guitar solos ever made, except for that one occasion. As a member of the Eagles, Walsh was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1998 and the Vocal Group Hall of Fame in 2001. The Eagles were one of the most influential bands of the 1970s and are still one of the best-selling American bands of all time. In 1975, Walsh was asked to join the Eagles as a founding member. At first, the band members were worried about Walsh's ability to fit in because he was thought to be too wild for the Eagles, especially Don Henley. By the time the long-awaited album came out, it had taken a year and a half to make, which, along with touring, drained the band. The second single from the album, which became one of the Eagles' signature songs, topped the charts in May 1997. One important thing about the album was that Henley sang lead vocals and Felder and Walsh played guitar duets. On the other hand, the hard rock song Life in the Fast Lane was based on a riff by Walsh. It reached number 11 on the charts and helped Walsh's position in the band. All of the other band members, except for Don Felder, played instruments and sang backup vocals on Randy Newman's album Little Criminals, which includes the song Short People, which has backup vocals by Frey and Schmidt. The Eagles broke up in July 1980. Walsh kept putting out solo albums during this time, but for some reason, Sauls didn't live up to the same standards in his personal life as he did in his earlier career. Walsh has also been through a lot of sad and hard times in his life. He married Margie Walsh in the 1960s, Stephanie Rhodes in the 1970s, Juanita Boer in the 1980s, and Denise Driscoll from 1999 to 2006. He was ultimately wedded to her on December 13, 2008. In Los Angeles, Walsh married Marjorie Bach, who was Barbara Bach's sister and Ringo Starr's sister-in-law. By December 1974, it was revealed that Walsh's first solo album, which came out at that time, had a few songs like Help Me Through the Night and Song for Emma, which was more like a tribute to Walsh's daughter who had died in a car accident. She was born on April 29, 1971, and died on April 1, 1974, at the age of 3, from injuries she got in a car accident on her way to nursery school. In her memory, he had a fountain and memorial plaque placed in a park where she played, North Boulder Park in Boulder, Colorado. He said that the album Nam So What was a result of Emma's death, as nothing else seemed meaningful or important in the months that followed. The strain eventually led to Walsh's divorce from his second wife. It was also reported that Walsh and Stevie Nicks had to break up because of their drug use. She found out about this after he told her friend and singer Sharon, "He's leaving Stevie because he's scared that one of them will die and the other won't be able to save them, because their drug use has gotten so bad that neither of them can live through it. The only way to save them both was for him to leave the relationship, even though he was having trouble with drugs." Hughes Walsh has also had trouble with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Obsessive compulsive disorder and Asperger's syndrome are not the only things that Walsh has. It was also revealed that he had trouble with strong drinks, especially early in his career. He has been sober since 1993. By the end of 1994, he had blacked out on a plane to Paris and woke up with his passport but no memory of getting on the plane. That was the turning point for him, and he has been sober ever since. Now let's talk about his relationship with Don Felder and how he couldn't stand up to the oppression they faced together. Felder and Walsh are both famous guitarists who participated in the legendary rock band Eagles. Connection was complicated because of their varied personalities and the band's difficulties. By the time Walsh joined the Eagles, but Felder had been with the band since 1974. Their work together in the band changed the band's sound, with Walsh providing a more bluesy style of play and Felder adding a more technical approach to guitar for years. Don Felder got to play with the legendary rock band Eagles because he had worked with them while they were firing him and going through a lot of lawsuits at the same time. Felder recently thought back on what it was like to play with Joe Walsh, another famous guitarist, and some of the sad things that happened to him during their time together in the famous band. His time with the Eagles didn't end the way he thought it would, though. Felder still remembered the best parts of being in the band and playing all over the world. He said that there was a rule that most guitarists followed. When someone was playing, you would step back and give them that time, and then they would step back and let you step forward. Then someone would start climbing up in their solo, and you would go down below and play in a lower tone to support them. You would cross on the way up and down and back. It's just something that you can't really teach someone how to do. It's more of a feel. Walsh and Felder made music together, which shows the unspoken rule among guitarists. Felder said that he and Joe Walsh were very comfortable jamming together, whether it was in the Eagles before he joined the Eagles or in Joe Walsh and Friends videos and other things. He also said that they were both able to do all of that without any prior planning, just by being sensitive to how the other person played and knowing when to play and when not to play, when to be a support character and when to step in and be a lead character, even though they had different styles of playing. Both Felder and Walsh were key to the band's success. Felder's contributions include the signature guitar solo on Hotel California. While Walsh was known for his skills and energetic stage presence, one thing was significant about the period they played together. While they both helped shape the band's sound, Felder and Walsh did get along personally, but it was speculated that soon a form of deep resentment began to set in. Felder revealed that at that time he felt ignored within the band, especially after Walsh's arrival. Walsh, on the other hand, was very free-spirited. Aside from that, his rock and roll background was seen as something wild compared to Felder's own approach. By the break of 2001, when Felder was dismissed from the Eagles due to personal and professional disagreements with Don Henley and Glenn, Fry Walsh, although not directly involved in the firing, was a part of the band during this period, and his role in the band's internal issues was also complicated following Felder's departure. There were reports of other internal tensions between him and his former bandmates, including Walsh. However, over time, Felder has mentioned that he's not in bad terms with everyone from the Eagles, though his relationship with some members, including Walsh, was affected after he left the band. As the band met their peak period in the music industry, tensions got worse, especially during in the 1970s when the Eagles became one of the most successful bands of the time. At this period, Don Henley and Glenn Frey, the band's main creative drivers, were taking more and more control of the band's direction. Felder said that Frey and Henley liked Walsh's style more and that he sometimes felt like an outcast. He also said that once during the recording of Hotel California, his performance on the renowned guitar solo for the title track was praised, but he believed that his contributions were often overlooked by the time. the band to move fired Felder. That caused a lot of problems. Felder said he was let go because he had personal problems with Glenn Frey and Don Henley, but the official reason was that his contract talks had broken down during this time. While Joe Walsh was still in the band, he reportedly wasn't as involved in the decision to fire Felder. However, because of the way Felder left and Walsh's close relationship with Frey and Henley, Felder thought he might have had an impact on the decision. This was especially true since he stayed with the band after Felder left. After Felder was fired, the relationship between him and the rest of the Eagles, including Walsh, became tense. Felder felt betrayed by his former bandmates, especially Frey and Henley. He later talked about how he didn't get along with Walsh, who he thought was a bad person because he was close to Henley and Frey when they decided to fire him. He also said that he had some personal resentment toward Walsh, especially because Walsh's carefree attitude was different from his own. It was like they were all more focused on Walsh after he left the band. Felder has said that he and Walsh didn't stay close after that. Joe Walsh, on the other hand, has mostly been more conciliatory about the separation. He hasn't fought with Felder in public very much and has typically minimized the band's problems. Walsh has also said that he would rather enjoy the music than get caught up in the drama that happened in the band. The relationship between Don Felder and Joe Walsh was a mix of musical collaboration and personal tension. Even though they had different playing styles and personalities, both were a big part of the band's success, and their interactions shaped the band's legendary sound. However, the internal strife that plagued the band during their success, along with the personal tensions that arose after Felder left, led to a strained relationship between the two, even though they respected each other's musical contributions. The personal problems between Felder and Walsh were never fully resolved. In addition to praising Tommy Shaw Sticks for his ability to play, write, and sing, Felder stressed that Tommy is a monster at that, and that he has the guitar skills and talent to play all those solos at the end of the harmonies and everything and sing. This makes him one of the best. As for himself and Walsh, he said they didn't see that moment as a competition or trying to take the spotlight. Instead, they were able to find the perfect groove. Grace to let the other person take the first step and hold hands while they do it. It wasn't about who was better than the other. It was just a fun challenge for Walsh to play, and then Felder to try to beat that on the times they played together. Walsh had a lot of problems because he used drugs, and it came out that Don Felder had to take him to treatment. The two of them grew so close that they would leave notes for each other at studios. But once Felder left, some people think that Walsh had to promise not to talk to him again if he wanted to stay in the Eagles. Glenn Frey and Don Felder have never gotten along, and it was no secret. At one point, many thought that everything that led to Felder leaving the band was about money. Glenn and Don Henley thought they should get most of the money because they saw themselves as the Eagles stars. Tim and Walsh never argued this because they knew they were just hired hands working on the dreams they had planned. But Felder had been in the band since the third album and deserved a bigger share. Unfortunately, that never happened. It always felt like Don Henley and Glenn Frey were in charge of the Eagles. And when Felder was in the lineup, it was like hell froze over. The band reunited in 1994 after he was fired for questioning the split of the finances. Felder then sued for wrongful termination and breach of contract. The case was resolved out of court years later. Felder also said that everything they did in the band was about Don and Glenn. They ran the band, owned it, and got paid the most for everything so they could do what they wanted. He can still feel how angry they were and how much venom they still had toward him, especially Glenn, during the current Eagles tour. Leon was welcomed back and sang a few songs, but Meisner couldn't join in since he was sick. Felder was clearly not invited to the party. Still, Felder said he enjoyed viewing old footage and recalling how scrawny and long-haired they all were. Outside of the Eagles, Felder has been recording and touring on his solo and with other bands, including the BGS. Stevie Wonder and Diana Ross Nick sometimes wrote songs for movies, but he couldn't sing in a band that already had 3 members. He had to find his performing voice as well as his lead vocals. Interestingly, Felder had a hit song in 1981 with the title song to the popular animated movie Heavy Metal, which could have been on the Eagles' penultimate album before they broke up. There were strict limits. He said that writing and recording songs with the Eagles was hard because you had to be in Eagles universe and anything outside of it just didn't work. On the other side, Felder also went into great depth about everything the band was doing. The sadness he also felt when Joe Walsh told him to sign the last contract so they could get on with things. And he could still be a hired hand, by the way, the big tragedy at the end of it. Joe Walsh was happy to be a hired hand, but Don Felder didn't want to stay that way. Before he left, he told Felder to just sign the contract, and that was the last time they talked. Felder had nothing to do with that album, and it would have been better for the Eagles if they had recorded their new album with Don Felder. It was also revealed that these were all the things he was trying to negotiate behind the scenes. Just sign the contract, Joe Walsh said. Joe Walsh was more like the guy who gets along quickly, and he liked the band's leadership. On the other hand, Don Felder didn't trust their leadership. Since Felder left the band, people have wondered if Walsh signed a contract that said he couldn't hang out with Felder or even play music with him, maybe because they started to see him as a traitor. It's sad and tragic that these two guys are no longer friends. These guys were excellent pals on stage and had wonderful chemistry when they played. They made some of the best rock songs ever. Imagine breaking up a powerful group of outstanding artists. The hardest part for Felder is that Joe Walsh can't speak up for himself and get out of the web. Don Felder's The News about Joe Walsh is both sad and helpful. It gives a vivid picture of how hard life can be. A man who, even though he was a great musician, talent had to deal with a lot of sorrow in Joe Walsh's life, from losing his father when he was young to losing his 3-year-old daughter in a traffic accident. He also had to deal with the mental pain of all his failed marriages. His problems with drugs, his lack of confidence, and personal troubles also hurt his relationships, even his friendship with Don Felder, even though they had great artistic chemistry. Felder and Walsh's different personalities and ways of making music caused problems, and even after things got better between them, Felder's leaving the Eagles was hard for him, and Walsh's choice to stay with the band made things worse between them. If you liked this video, please like it, subscribe, and click on the next video that comes up on your screen.